Well, this is just absolutely horrific. I'm sure you heard the news, but we do now have confirmation that prominent right-wing activist and media figure, Trump ally, just a really prominent man, Charlie Kirk, has died after being shot in the neck at Utah Valley University. He was holding an event, debating people and speaking, and someone shot him horrifically to death. And the videos are circulating. I don't think there's any need to play. It's just so disgusting. And truly, I think a lot of people are having this feeling right now, especially who do some form of political activism, on this human level, imagining that could be anyone. That could be anyone who chooses to speak their political opinions in front of a lot of people. And so more than even other times we've covered horrific political violence, there's this level of just profound heartbreak for Charlie Kirk's family, his loved ones, for him, and for the state of our country. And as you all know, people always bring this up. I don't think it's really relevant in a moment like this, but Charlie Kirk and I could not have more different political views. And I'm seeing, unfortunately, a lot of people online choosing the path of mockery in some cases. Now, these aren't prominent Democrats universally. They are, of course, opposed to this. But even some of my counterparts' YouTube videos, I read some comments, and people are saying things that place me in a really dark place of despair about where we are. If our movement cannot see violence like this against a man, against a father, against a husband who has kids, and have no other take, first and foremost, than deep and profound despair and opposition, then I don't exactly know what we're doing this for. If we don't have moral clarity about this, then what are we even advocating if we can't see this as a clear violation of everything we're supposed to advocate and everything we're supposed to hold dear? Just to show you, he's a husband. I've personally done plenty of segments, wildly critical. And then please tap in. If those are the thoughts as I'm seeing, shockingly, online, not super relevant voices, but nevertheless, tap into your humanity. Look, beautiful children, beautiful wife who just lost their dad and their husband. That is the worst of what politics can be. And we know very little right now, other than the video that we have and the news that he has indeed died after being murdered. About the shooter, there was conflicting reports about this was the shooter and being arrested, but it looks like actually that was the wrong person and the shooter's at large still. So that's frightening. And we'll wait to discuss exactly what the story around the shooter is until we have more information. People get things wrong jumping into action, discussing these types of stories all too frequently, and I'm not going to make that mistake. But the New York Times reports Charlie Kirk, a close ally of President Trump and the founder of the nation's preeminent right-wing youth activist organization, was fatally shot on Wednesday while speaking at a campus event at Utah Valley University. Spokesman said, Trump posted, "The great and even legendary Charlie Kirk is dead. No one understood or had the heart of the youth in the United States of America better than Charlie. He was loved and admired by all, especially me, and now he's no longer with us. Melania and my sympathies go out to his beautiful wife, Erica, and family. Charlie, we love you." So just absolutely horrendous, and it breaks my heart It really does. Here is some CNN coverage.
The prayers are so all-consuming right now and bipartisan. Everyone from President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance to members of the cabinet to Democratic leaders like Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer. Bipartisan condemnation of this act of political violence. It's a reminder, Brianna, that in a country like America, in a democracy, we only have a democracy if we settle our disagreements with words, not with violence. You know, for the liberals, for the anti-Trump voices, for the anti-Kirk voices out there who feel despair, about the direction of the country's politics, the way to address that is through words, not through violence. And so whenever we see one of these appalling crimes, it is disturbing because it cuts to the core of how the American democracy functions.
Yeah, certainly does.
Exactly. Perfectly said. Everything. I just want to keep saying this because I'm sure all of the notable, influential folks are going to have the exact same response as any decent person would, which is profound despair and heartbreak. But because I happened to, right before we started recording the segment, stumble across some random online people being gross, it's kind of top of mind. But if we are to believe that our advocacy is in the interest of a better American democracy, and when we're critical of different people on the other side, that's all, when we're intense, passionately, aggressively critical against people on the side, it's all in the interest of moving forward the quality of our democratic process and of its serving of the people, then what is more important as a principle to stand for than opposing this? Because this is the fastest degrading variable of a healthy democracy. You have, just videos of his beautiful children and him being a father. And that is where my mind is at and my heart is. And I mean, the violence, just this popped up while we were preparing to cover this story. You have 3 students were critically wounded on Wednesday. So as that is happening, then Evergreen High School in Colorado, you have a mass shooting, this epidemic of violence and gun violence that is impacting and touching everybody. And so that's what happened. And again, my heart breaks and my pain and my thoughts and all of it are with Kirk's family, his loved ones, and the people who cared for him. And then the immediate political response is one that we're going to be discussing and following in the coming days. And this is what, similar to after Melissa Hortman, the Democratic state representative, and her husband were assassinated, and even after the Trump assassination attempt and different political violence instances, what always compounds the despair is the response afterwards. And seeing, I saw a right-wing account post, "This is war." And then they're posting, clips of people purporting to be left-wing celebrating this. And that's why I say, if you choose to throw more fuel onto a violent fire, if anyone in my audience has that inclination, either you're not a part of the same movement as me, or please rethink your approach. An example of the one that has been really disturbing me, I saw a comment on someone's YouTube video that went something like, "I'll care as much for him as MAGA cared about Melissa Hortman," which, again, the state representative assassinated by a Trump supporter. And what's being referenced is like Mike Lee, the Republican senator, in the immediate aftermath was joking about it, and a bunch of people online were lying about and joking about this assassination of a liberal figure. And so sometimes, and this is what is disturbing me, people who, based on the channel that I saw the comment on and a bunch of comments like it, I probably have some crossover of people who might click on this video. I just need to be unequivocal that you're abandoning everything that you think When you see someone on the right making fun of Melissa Hortman, if your response is, okay, then I'm going to make fun of Charlie Kirk, or I'm not going to care, or I'm not going to see this as utterly and completely wrong, then you don't actually have the principles that you think you do, or you're not better than the people you were upset with for mocking Paul Pelosi's attack, as another example. The way that we make some progress in stopping horrendous acts of violence like this, it starts with you and it starts with me modeling the behavior we think that everyone should model. Even coaching people through how they should be more empathetic makes me a little nauseous, because I think, regardless of how you feel about somebody's politics, that you would have two quick, deep thoughts and feelings when seeing this. Number one, if you saw the video, horrifically disturbing to see someone just massacred, killed in front of a crowd of people, and then to see their family know that there's all of these people who are going to be devastated losing a loved one. And number two, as I said before, potentially the greatest impediment to a functioning, healthy political discourse and democracy is violence like this. Whichever side it's impacting. And we've seen this sort of violence ramp up, and it's impacting both sides. People will bring up in their justification for harmful words, hey, well, a comparison that I've explained, whenever a terrible act of violence happens against a right-wing figure, powerful elected Democrats all have the same response, which is to denounce. But when it happens to a left-wing figure, often elected Republicans, like the Mike Lee example, will mock it, or prominent people like Don Jr. or Trump making fun of Paul Pelosi. But you bringing up that comparison, one that I've outlined before, as then justifying you not being human, tapping into your humanity, then makes you no better. And we cannot continue the cycle. And I'm very worried, convinced even, that we're going to, of violence, and then of apology for violence, and then of using acts of violence as justification for violence against the people who you believe are a part of the movement that perpetuated the violence. And again, at this time, technically, we don't know exactly who the person was, what their motivations were. You assume, because of who Charlie Kirk is, their political motivations. There have been times in the past where then the background of the person, was surprising. And it didn't align with the politics that you thought, but we just don't know right now. But the assumption is that it would be someone who's opposed to his politics, especially the event was a specifically political debate type of event. And if we keep, even just in online discourse, it's true that you have a unanimous response from anyone in positions of power who are Democratic, who are all horrified by this. But that doesn't mean when I make that statement, or I compare the two elected sides of the discourse when we talk about generally political violence, it doesn't mean that online voices don't have an impact. And my visceral disgust with some of the stuff I saw, even if it isn't someone you would say who has all this influence, it does represent a major problem. And I don't think that immediately jumping into comparisons of, oh yeah, that's bad, that person said that, but did you remember when the MAGA person said this about Hortman? Because at some point, someone has to be the person, some group have to be the people who changes this rising of tensions and rising of violence. And why shouldn't it be, and I wish it would automatically be, people who feel in their heart what is obviously the case, which is on a human level, an individual level. This is so tragic and so heartbreaking. Now parents don't have kids don't have a father. And to our broader moment in American history, it's so degrading. I mean, even just to make it, I don't really have the inclination to do this, because to me, all I can think about is just, again, those scenes of how Kirk died and the scenes of his beautiful family and the loss of life there. But a lot of people have been bringing this up to me. So because this is, my experience, think about what I do and all of the people out there who might also want to do what Charlie Kirk does on a, in a slightly different way. But what he did in his political activism. And when you start seeing that increasingly just that political activism can get you killed, it is suppressing the most beautiful part of America, which is supposed to be those competing voices, and that we can share all of our different strong and aggressive thoughts with each other with no worry that if we show up to an event to speak to people, we're going to die. And so that compounds just how horrific, because he was in such a relatable position. What he was doing, it was so close to home, so real. Maybe is why this is, of particular passion. And just to repeat one more time, all that we talk about every day, what we're talking about, the activism we're doing, however terrible some of the stories we talk about, Trump administration doing this and all of that, what is it all for? If not to move forward a healthier American democracy and a healthier political discourse. And nothing is less healthy and less progress oriented than this. Not to mention, again, the most important part on an individual level, the tragedy and kids losing a father again, and a wife losing a husband. And then one other, just as I'm kind of giving you my thoughts right here in the moment, another take that I'm seeing is bringing it to gun regulation. And it was in Utah and gun regulations. And anytime there's gun violence, I've told you all, I'm actually totally fine with discussing, okay, what could have prevented this on numerous fronts? Is there, with future, I hate that we have to think about this, but future events future events, right-wing figures do, there needs to be enhanced security because of the horrific position we're in right now in American politics. And I actually think it's perfectly acceptable to say, in this case, is there anything given that, and then another gun violence mass shooting happened while this was happening, we have to do something. Totally fair. I don't see that as insensitive. And that's always going to be given our policy passions, something that we think about. We have to do something systematically to prevent so much violence and gun violence. What I do see as insensitive and inappropriate is then leveraging that because of the activism that Kirk did as another means of mockery, because we disagreed on that stance. If you want to discuss what in this case and the mass shooting that happened right as that was happening, and in the epidemic of gun violence we have, what can we do to get this under control? Fair. But anything that starts leaning into that mockery or the making light goes back to what I said before. You're abandoning your principles of enhancing, making more safe, more free, more open our political discourse on democracy rather than the opposite. And this does, as horrifically as you can imagine, the opposite. Again, in pain and a heart's break for Kirk's family and his loved ones.